What if the United States had never dropped the atomic bombs? Imagine this. August 1945, Hiroshima and Nagasaki are standing quietly, and Truman, rubbing his hands together, says, "No, guys, let's send Japan an angry letter." The paradox is that these two bombs, Little Boy and Fat Man, were not just the end of World War II, but also the start of an entire era where the world trembled at the thought, what if someone pushes the button again? But what if this had not happened? Would we now be sitting at the negotiating table with samurai who refused to surrender? Would American generals be chasing the emperor with a megaphone? "Hirohito, surrender! We are losing patience." This topic is like a sip of strong coffee for those who like to dig into history and ask, what if? The two bombs dropped on Japan did not just end the war, they reshaped the world, launched the Cold War, and made us all learn what a nuclear mushroom is in school. But imagine that in 1945, someone in Washington simply lost the keys to the bomb bay. Or even better, Truman decided, come on, we'd rather play poker with Stalin than set off fireworks. The irony is that one missed moment could have changed everything from the fate of Japan to the way we look at war and peace. And this is not just talk about what could have been. This is a chance to look into an alternative world where history took a different path. And believe me, there is something to see there. Why is it interesting? Because the decision to drop the bombs was like a dice roll in a game where the whole world was at stake. Without them, the war could have dragged on, Japan could have resisted to the last soldier, and Stalin might have been treating us to tea on the Hokkaido Islands. It's also an opportunity to laugh at how serious men in suits could panic without the big red button at hand. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, or tea if you're in the spirit of a peaceful world, and get ready for a story you won't be able to put down. We're going to go through a history where there were no atomic bombs, and I promise you it will be fun, a little strange, and very exciting. Come on, friends, it's time to rewrite 1945. So let's go back to the summer of 1945. In reality, the United States drops atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan surrenders, and the world enters an era of nuclear fear. But let's imagine that this did not happen. Let's say that Truman listens to his advisors, who grumble, maybe we shouldn't. Stalin will be offended. Or the weather over Japan deteriorates and the pilots of the Enola Gay simply turn back home. Well, not today, guys. What happens then? Japan does not surrender without atomic bombs in August 1945. Emperor Hirohito, though under pressure, listens to his generals who shout, "The samurai do not surrender." The war continues, and the Allies are preparing for Operation Downfall, the invasion of the Japanese islands. Imagine this. Millions of American soldiers land on Kyushu, and the Japanese, from peasants with pitchforks to school children with bamboo spears, rush into battle. The losses are terrible. Historians estimate that up to 1 million Americans and several million Japanese may have died. The irony is that Truman, who in reality was afraid of such numbers, is forced to watch his generals argue over who will be the first to plant the flag in Tokyo. The Soviet Union, which in reality managed to capture Manchuria, goes further. Stalin, rubbing his mustache, orders his troops to advance to Hokkaido. By the end of 1945, the north of Japan is red, and Hirohito may have signed the surrender not to the United States but to Comrade Joseph. Imagine American diplomats grumbling, "We've been dying here, and Stalin is already having sake tea." Without Hiroshima and Nagasaki, nuclear weapons do not demonstrate their power. The United States still has the bomb. The test at Alamogordo was successful, but the world does not see it in action. Japan surrenders, say, in 1946 after a grueling invasion, and the atomic age does not begin with a big bang. Stalin, who in reality rushed to catch up with the United States, is in no hurry here. Soviet spies, of course, steal the blueprints. But without the nuclear show, the Kremlin invests more in tanks and guns than in bombs. The Cold War is becoming warmer, more local conflicts, less fear of the apocalypse. In Europe, this is felt immediately. Without a nuclear deterrent, Stalin might have been bolder in his advance to the West. The Berlin conflict of 1948 could have escalated into a real war, because no one is afraid of the mushroom overhead. Imagine Truman shouting into the phone, "Joseph, move your tanks or I'll, send you another angry letter." The Americans, of course, developed the bomb, but without a public demonstration, it remains just an expensive toy until the late 1940s. Japan, having escaped the atomic horror, emerges from the war devastated but not demoralized as it was in reality. The invasion leaves the country in chaos, but without the nuclear shock, it retains more national pride. Instead of rapid Americanization, the military spirit lasts longer. The economic miracle, which in reality began in the 50s, is delayed. The infrastructure is destroyed, and American aid is less because the US spent all its resources on the invasion. Imagine Japanese engineers grumbling, "If not for these samurai, we would have invented the transistor by now." Politically, Japan could have become a contested area. With the North under Stalin and the South under the United States, the country is divided like Korea. By the 1950s, the two Japans, communist and capitalist, become a battleground of the Cold War. Tokyo may be surrounded by a wall, but sake is drunk on both sides of the barricades. The irony is that Japan, which in reality has become a symbol of peace, could become a second Vietnam here. Without nuclear fireworks, nuclear energy is developing more slowly. In reality, Hiroshima has accelerated interest in nuclear technology, both for weapons and for the peaceful atom. At the same time, the world was focusing on coal and oil, and the first reactors appeared only in the 1960s. Imagine Eisenhower advertising atoms for peace around 1970, when everyone had already forgotten what it was. Culture is also changing. Without the image of the nuclear mushroom, Hollywood is making fewer apocalypse movies. Instead of Dr. Strangelove, we watch another movie about the heroes of the war with Japan. Pop culture is losing its atomic chic. No more bomb shelters in backyards and comic books about mutants. It's funny to imagine Stan Lee inventing Spider-Man without radiation. Was he bitten by a very evil spider? Without atomic bombs, international politics becomes more colorful. In reality, Hiroshima and Nagasaki showed the world who was the chief sheriff, and the United States quickly cemented its status as a superpower. Here, when the war ends with an exhausting invasion, America comes out of it ragged, and Britain and France, who in reality were rebuilding under the Marshall Plan, demand a bigger piece of the pie. Imagine Churchill grumbling, "We were dying in Europe, and you were messing around with the Japanese. Let's share the influence fairly." China, which in reality was fighting a civil war, can unite under Mao more quickly here, because Stalin, busy with Japan, interferes less. By the 1950s, the world is divided not into two camps, but into 5 or 6, and everyone is shouting, "My army is cooler." The irony is that without nuclear fear, all these sheriffs are chasing each other with revolvers but no guns. And what about people? In reality, atomic bombs have become a symbol of never again, forcing the world to think about the cost of war. Without them, the Second World War ended not with an explosion, but with a long, bloody slaughter, and society remained in tension. In the United States, veterans return home not as heroes of a quick victory, but as exhausted soldiers of an endless campaign. Imagine an American housewife complaining, "My husband is back, but he keeps telling me how he was chasing samurai through the mountains." In Japan, where the invasion destroyed cities as much as the bombs, people clung to the militaristic spirit longer, and the peace movement, which in reality flourished, was born later. The global 1950s are not an era of rock and roll and reconstruction, but a time of gloomy memories of a war that does not let go. It's funny to imagine children playing not saviors from the atom, but the last samurai, with wooden swords and serious faces. By the 2000s, the world looked different. The Cold War may be ending later, because without nuclear parity, the United States and the Soviet Union are shaking their fists longer. Japan, divided or exhausted, does not become a technological giant so quickly. No Sony or Toyota in every home. The Middle East, where in reality nuclear fear has kept conflicts at bay, could be a hotspot here because no one is afraid of the Big Bang. Nuclear weapons eventually appear, but later, say in the 60s, when they are tested in the desert and the world just shrugs its shoulders. Well, better late than never. And what about us? Maybe we would live in a world where wars are more frequent but less catastrophic, or where Stalin and Truman are still arguing over whose island is cooler. The irony is that the bombs that we consider terrifying might have been what made us hold back a little. So, what do we have? A world without atomic bombs in 1945 means a longer World War II, Japan in ruins from invasion rather than explosions, a Cold War with tanks instead of missiles, and technology weaving like a turtle on vacation. Stalin may be drinking sake in Hokkaido, Truman is writing letters, and the Japanese are still arguing whether it was worth holding on to samurai principles. No nuclear mushrooms over Hiroshima, no bomb shelters in backyards, and you know what? Maybe we'd still be drinking tea instead of coffee because the war had delayed all supplies. This alternative history shows how a single moment, a decision not to drop the bombs, could have prolonged the war, changed Japan, and put the nuclear fear to rest. Without that Big Bang, the world would have been louder with fighting, but quieter with apocalyptic predictions. Just imagine, we could live in a reality where Hollywood makes westerns, not doomsday thrillers, and Stalin and Truman play chess for Japan. It's funny, but a little scary, right? Those bombs may have been horrifying, but without them, we would have been stuck in the trenches longer. Now think about our real world. We are used to thinking of it as stable, but what if one pilot in 1945 had simply lost his way? Everything could have gone differently, from borders to how we fear war. This fragility of history is like a cup of coffee on the edge of a table. One careless move, and everything goes down. The irony is that the explosions we curse could have been the brakes that prevented us from sliding into even greater chaos. If you enjoyed pondering such what-ifs, please like the video. It's a sign that you're ready for new historical twists and turns. And subscribe, because there are many more stories ahead that you won't be able to put down. Let's figure out together how history could turn. In the meantime, pour yourself a cup of coffee or tea if you've already experienced a world without atomic bombs. See you in the next story.